Marcus thought he was trading up when he left Simone for a younger woman with better connections. He walked out the day before her biggest presentation, calling her dreams cute little hobbies. 24 hours later, Simone signed a deal that would make her a millionaire. His face when he found out? Priceless. This is a story about betrayal, karma, and the sweetest revenge of all, massive success. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this unfolds, and stick around until the very end, because the way karma comes full circle will leave you speechless. Now, let's get into it. Simone Davis was the kind of woman who lit up every room she entered. At 34, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that came from years of grinding, dreaming, and refusing to give up. She was a graphic designer with a vision that went beyond pretty logos and color schemes. She saw brands as stories waiting to be told, and she had the talent to tell them beautifully. Her small design agency, built from the spare bedroom of the apartment she shared with her husband, was her pride and joy. Every late night, every rejected pitch, every small victory, it all mattered to her. Marcus Davis, her husband of 8 years, was different. He was a corporate manager at a mid-sized firm, the kind of guy who wore expensive suits and talked about leveraging synergies at dinner parties. At 36, he'd climbed the corporate ladder with the same determination Simone poured into her business. But somewhere along the way, his ambition had curdled into arrogance. Once upon a time, he'd been the college boyfriend who believed in Simone's dreams. He'd been the man who held her hand when she was scared, who told her she could do anything. But that man had faded, replaced by someone who measured worth in salary figures and social status. Their love story had started like a fairy tale. They'd met in college, 2 ambitious kids with stars in their eyes and big plans for the future. Simone had worked 2 jobs to help Marcus through his MBA program, believing in him when he doubted himself. She'd been his rock, his cheerleader, his home. And when he finally landed that corporate position, she thought their struggles were over. She thought it was finally her turn to chase her dreams, while he supported her the way she'd supported him. She thought wrong. As Marcus's career soared and his paycheck grew, something shifted. The man who once bragged about his brilliant wife started introducing her as someone who does some design stuff on the side. At dinner parties, when Simone talked about her business, Marcus would chuckle and call it her cute little hobby, as if her dreams were adorable but ultimately insignificant. The words stung every single time, but Simone swallowed the hurt and kept pushing forward. She told herself he was just stressed from work, that he didn't mean to be dismissive, that the man she married was still in there somewhere. But then came the opportunity that would change everything. Simone landed a meeting with Tech Vision Industries, one of the biggest tech companies in the country. They were rebranding, and they wanted fresh, innovative ideas. Simone had been preparing for months, crafting a presentation that showcased not just her design skills, but her understanding of their market, their audience, their potential. This wasn't just another pitch. This was the moment she'd been working toward for years. This was her shot at the big leagues. Marcus barely looked up from his phone when she told him about the meeting. "That's nice," he muttered, scrolling through emails. When she tried to share her ideas, hoping for some encouragement or feedback, he interrupted her. "Simone, I've got a real presentation to prepare for. Can we talk about your thing later?" Her thing. As if years of hard work and talent could be reduced to a casual afterthought. That night, Simone lay awake beside her husband, feeling more alone than she'd ever felt in her life. The distance between them had grown into a canyon, but Simone hadn't realized just how wide until she noticed the signs she'd been too busy to see. Marcus stayed late at the office more nights than he came home. When he was home, he was glued to his phone, smiling at messages he angled away from her view. There was new cologne, expensive and unfamiliar. There were hushed phone calls he took in the other room. And there was a coldness in his eyes when he looked at her, as if she'd become a stranger in her own marriage. The truth came crashing down 3 days before her Tech Vision presentation. Simone had borrowed Marcus's laptop when hers died, and she'd seen the messages. Jasmine, a 26-year-old woman from his office, blonde and beautiful, from the kind of wealthy family that summered in the Hamptons and had a last name that opened doors. The messages were intimate, affectionate, filled with promises and plans for a future that didn't include Simone. Her hands shook as she scrolled through months of deception. While she'd been building her business and fighting for their marriage, Marcus had been building a completely different life. When she confronted him, Marcus didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He was defensive, almost annoyed that she'd discovered his secret before he was ready to reveal it on his own terms. "You're always working," he said, as if that justified betrayal. "You're always focused on your little projects, Simone. When was the last time you paid attention to me?" The audacity of it nearly knocked her breathless. She'd worked 2 jobs to put him through business school. She'd sacrificed her own dreams for years so he could chase his. And now he was blaming her for being too focused on finally pursuing her own success. But the worst was yet to come. The night before her Tech Vision presentation, the most important day of her professional life, Marcus packed his bags. Simone watched in disbelief as he loaded suitcases into his car, moving with the casual efficiency of someone who'd already mentally checked out. "Please," she heard herself say, hating how small her voice sounded. "Just wait one more day, after my presentation. Please, Marcus." She wasn't even asking him to stay permanently. She just needed him to wait 24 hours so she could focus on the opportunity she'd worked so hard for. Marcus turned to her with a look of such complete dismissiveness that it would haunt her for months. "I'm not wasting another minute on your cute little hobby, Simone," he said. "Jasmine's family has real connections, real money. She's going places and I'm going with her. You've been playing business for years, and where has it gotten you? You're still working out of a spare bedroom, pitching to companies that will probably say no like all the others. When are you going to accept that you're just not cut out for this?" He walked out the door without looking back, and Simone collapsed on the floor of the apartment they'd shared for 8 years. She cried until she had no tears left, until her chest ached and her eyes were swollen nearly shut. The man she'd loved, the man she'd built a life with, had abandoned her at her lowest point. He'd kicked her while she was down, mocked her dreams, and chosen someone else. Tomorrow was supposed to be her moment, and now all she could think about was how alone she was, how much she'd lost, how deeply he'd broken her. But somewhere around 3 in the morning, something shifted inside Simone. She thought about her grandmother, who'd raised 4 children alone after her husband left, who'd built a life from nothing, who'd taught Simone that Black women had been surviving and thriving against impossible odds for generations. She thought about every person who'd ever doubted her, every door that had closed in her face, every time she'd been underestimated or dismissed. And she thought about Marcus's words, "You're just not cut out for this." Simone pulled herself off the floor, washed her face, and opened her laptop. If this presentation was going to happen, she needed to be flawless. She spent the rest of the night rehearsing, refining, perfecting every slide and every word. Her heart was shattered, but her resolve had never been stronger. Marcus thought he'd broken her. He had no idea he'd just set her free. Simone walked into Tech Vision Industries the next morning looking like she owned the building. Her navy suit was crisp and professional, her natural hair styled in elegant twists, her makeup carefully applied to hide the evidence of her sleepless night. Inside, she was still reeling from Marcus's departure, but she'd learned long ago how to channel pain into power. The conference room was intimidating, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a long mahogany table, 5 executives with expressions that gave nothing away. She started her presentation, and within minutes, the room's energy changed. Simone wasn't just pitching designs. She was telling a story about Tech Vision's future, about how the right branding could transform them from just another tech company into an industry leader. She'd analyzed their competitors, identified gaps in their market positioning, and created a visual identity that was bold, innovative, and completely aligned with their corporate values. Every slide was perfect. Every word landed exactly as she intended. She wasn't hoping to impress them. She was making it impossible for them not to hire her. The executives leaned forward, asking questions, nodding, exchanging glances that Simone recognized as excitement. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before the CEO started clapping. The others joined in. "Ms. Davis," the CEO said, "in 20 years of business, I've never seen a pitch this comprehensive or innovative. When can you start?" Simone felt her heart hammering in her chest. They weren't asking for time to think about it or compare her to other candidates. They were offering her the contract right there, on the spot. The details came fast. A 3-year contract worth $2.3 million, full creative control, a team of designers she'd lead, stock options, benefits that exceeded anything she'd imagined. Simone signed the contract that afternoon, her hand trembling slightly as she wrote her name. When she walked out of that building, she stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, letting it sink in. Less than 24 hours ago, her husband had walked out on her, calling her dreams a cute little hobby. Now she was a millionaire with a contract that would launch her into the stratosphere of her industry. News traveled fast in their social circle. By that weekend, everyone knew about Simone's massive contract, and everyone knew that Marcus had left her the day before she secured it. At a party he attended with Jasmine, a mutual friend approached him with congratulations, not for him but for Simone's incredible success. Marcus's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice tight. When the friend explained about Tech Vision and the multi-million-dollar contract, Marcus actually stumbled backward, grabbing the edge of a table to steady himself. He'd left her because he thought she was going nowhere. He'd mocked her business as a hobby. He'd chosen Jasmine because her family had connections and money, and now Simone, the woman he'd abandoned, had secured success beyond anything he'd achieved in his corporate career. Jasmine, standing beside him, raised an eyebrow. "That's the ex-wife you said was going nowhere?" she asked coolly. Suddenly, Marcus didn't look quite as impressive. Suddenly, his decision-making seemed questionable. Suddenly, Jasmine was seeing him through very different eyes. Marcus tried calling Simone that night. She didn't answer. He tried again the next day and the day after. Each call went straight to voicemail. He drove to their apartment and discovered she'd moved out, leaving no forwarding address. At work, his colleagues had heard the story, not from Simone, who maintained dignified silence, but through the grapevine that loved gossip about public failures. Marcus became that guy. The fool who'd left his wife right before she hit it big. Even his parents called, disappointed and ashamed of how he'd treated a woman who'd supported him through everything. 6 months later, Simone was unrecognizable from the broken woman Marcus had left behind. Her design firm had exploded, with 3 major clients beyond Tech Vision and a waiting list of companies desperate to work with her. She'd been featured in business magazines with headlines like "The Designer Who's Revolutionizing Tech Branding" and "From Spare Bedroom to Multi-Million-Dollar Empire." She'd moved into a stunning brownstone in the city's most desirable neighborhood, filled with art and light, and the kind of beauty she'd always dreamed of creating in her own space. But the real change was internal. Simone carried herself differently now, with a confidence that came from knowing she'd survived the worst betrayal and come out stronger. She'd started dating again, a fellow entrepreneur who respected her ambition and celebrated her success instead of feeling threatened by it. She'd reconnected with friends she'd neglected during her marriage, built a support system that actually supported her, and discovered that life without Marcus was infinitely better than life with him had ever been. The confrontation happened at an industry event where Simone was a keynote speaker. She was backstage, reviewing her notes when she felt someone's presence. She looked up to find Marcus standing there, looking smaller somehow, diminished. "Simone," he said, and she heard everything in that one word: regret, longing, desperation. "Can we talk?" She considered refusing, but curiosity won out. They stepped into a quiet hallway, and Marcus launched into an apology that sounded rehearsed. He'd made a mistake, he said. He'd been stupid, he said. They'd been good together, he said, and maybe they could try again. Simone looked at the man she'd once loved and felt nothing but a distant sort of pity. "Marcus," she said calmly, "you did me the biggest favor of my life when you walked out." He flinched like she'd slapped him. "You forced me to bet everything on myself. You made me realize I didn't need your validation or your support. You showed me exactly who you were, and you freed me to become who I was always meant to be." She smiled, genuinely. "So thank you, truly. I hope Jasmine makes you happy." She walked away without looking back, and Marcus stood frozen in the hallway, finally understanding the magnitude of what he'd lost. But karma wasn't finished yet. The final twist came when Marcus's company put in a bid for a major tech contract and lost to Simone's firm. TechVision had been so impressed with her work that they'd recommended her to other companies in their network. The contract Marcus's company desperately wanted went to Simone instead, and his boss made it very clear that losing such a lucrative opportunity would have consequences for Marcus's career. If he'd stayed married to Simone, if he'd supported her dreams instead of mocking them, he could have shared in her success. Instead, his betrayal had not only cost him his marriage, it was now costing him professionally too. Simone heard about the lost contract through industry channels. She didn't gloat or celebrate Marcus's downfall. She simply continued building her empire, hiring talented people, creating beautiful work, and living a life that exceeded every dream she'd ever had. Marcus had thought he was trading up when he left her. Instead, he'd traded away the best thing that ever happened to him, and by the time he realized it, it was far too late. The best revenge isn't anger or bitterness. It's massive, undeniable success. It's becoming so completely, radiantly happy that the person who hurt you becomes irrelevant. Simone didn't need Marcus to fail for her to win. She just needed to believe in herself the way she'd once believed in him. And in the end, that made all the difference. If you loved this story of karma and comeback, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of justice served cold. Drop a comment and tell me, what would you have said to Marcus at that industry event? And remember, when someone walks away from you, sometimes they're just clearing the path for something infinitely better. Until next time, keep pushing forward, keep believing in yourself, and never let anyone call your dreams a hobby.